Sarah Chen walked down the long hallway toward the Grand Assembly Hall. Her black shoes clicked on the smooth metal floor. Behind her, 20 other human representatives followed in silence. They all knew what was about to happen. The massive doors opened with a soft whoosh. Inside, the circular chamber stretched up toward a glass dome that showed the stars beyond. 347 different alien species sat in rows that curved around the center speaking area. Some had fur. Others had scales. A few glowed with soft light. Many looked nothing like humans at all. Sarah stepped onto the raised platform in the center. The room grew quiet. She looked around at faces that had become familiar over the past 5 years. Some she considered friends. Others barely tolerated humanity's presence in the council. "Honored delegates," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Today we vote on Resolution 2847. This resolution would stop the slave trade in the Outer Rim territories. It would make it illegal to buy, sell, or transport thinking beings against their will." A low rumble of voices filled the room. Sarah waited for quiet, then continued. "For 300 years, this council has existed to bring peace and order to our galaxy. But peace, built on suffering, is not real peace. Order that allows slavery is not real order." In the Zalari section, Ambassador Krextal stood up. His blue skin gleamed under the chamber lights. "The human speaks of suffering," he said with a voice like grinding metal. "But business is business. The Outer Rim traders provide cheap workers. This benefits everyone. Cheap workers?" Sarah's voice stayed calm, but her eyes flashed. "They are people. They have families. They have dreams. They feel pain just like you do." Krextal made a sound like laughing. "Human emotions again. This is why your species is still young. You let feelings control your thoughts." From another section, a massive creature covered in thick armor plates spoke. This was Warlord Thog of the Korthak Empire. "The Korthak have used slave labor for 2,000 years. It builds strong societies. The weak serve the strong. This is natural law." Sarah took a deep breath. She had heard these arguments many times before. Natural law? Or just an excuse to hurt others? "The human insults us," Thog rumbled. "Perhaps humanity needs to learn respect." "Respect?" Sarah looked directly at him. "Respect is earned. What has slavery earned you except fear and hate?" Council President Thaxon raised his forearms for silence. The Althari leader's purple robes flowed around his tall, thin body. "We have heard both sides," he said in his musical voice. "Now we vote." The voting display appeared above the chamber. Each species' symbol appeared in either green for yes or red for no. Sarah watched as the red section grew larger and larger. Her heart sank, but her face showed nothing. When the counting finished, the result was clear. Only 42 species voted yes. 305 voted no. Resolution 2847 fails, President Thaxon announced. "The motion is rejected." Sarah stood still for a moment. Around her, some delegates were already talking about other business. Others were getting up to leave for lunch. To them, this was just another day. But Sarah remembered the reports she had read last week. A ship full of children from a planet called Kepler 442b, sold to work in the mining colonies. A family of peaceful farmers taken from their home and forced to work in factories. Thousands of stories like these. And the council had just said they didn't matter. Sarah reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. She connected it to the chamber's communication system. Her voice filled the room again. 5 years ago, humanity joined this council with hope, she said. We believed we could work together to make the galaxy better. We brought our knowledge, our technology, our friendship. We thought we had found a family among the stars. The room was getting quiet again. Even those who had been leaving stopped to listen. But this was the 15th time this year that you have rejected our proposals to help those who suffer. 15 times we asked you to choose kindness over profit. 15 times you said no. Krextal stood up again. If humans do not like how we do things, perhaps humans should leave. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, but it was not a happy smile. That is exactly what we are going to do. She reached into her other pocket and pulled out a small book. It was the Galactic Charter, the document that created the Council. Article 847 says any member species may withdraw from the Council at any time, for any reason. President Thaxon leaned forward. Ambassador Chen, surely we can discuss this. We tried to discuss it, Sarah said. For 5 years we tried. But you don't want to listen. You want us to be quiet and follow your rules. Even when your rules allow cruelty. She opened the charter to a marked page. I, Sarah Chen, speaking for all of humanity, invoke Article 847. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates shouted in anger. Others seemed confused. A few looked worried. Sarah took the credentials that marked her as Earth's ambassador and placed them on the podium. These represent humanity's membership in this council. We no longer want them. Behind her, the other human representatives began placing their credentials on the platform as well. 21 small badges that had taken years to earn, now abandoned in a pile. Wait, President Thaxon called out. You cannot simply leave. Think of the consequences. Sarah turned back to face him. We have thought of the consequences. We have thought of them every night for months. The consequence of staying is becoming part of something we cannot respect. The consequence of leaving is keeping our souls clean. She walked toward the exit, followed by her team. At the doors, she stopped and looked back one more time. When you are ready to build a galaxy based on justice instead of profit, you know where to find us. Until then, we have nothing more to say. The doors closed behind the humans with a soft sound. In the chamber, 326 alien species sat in stunned silence. Finally, Krextal spoke. Good. Now we can get back to real business. But President Thaxon was not so sure. He stared at the pile of human credentials and wondered what they had just lost. 3 days after the humans left, Dr. Elizabeth Reeves was packing her laboratory. She had spent 7 years studying alien diseases at the Galactic Health Center. Her research had saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. Elizabeth picked up a data crystal containing her work on Zilari fever, a disease that had killed thousands before she found the cure. She placed it carefully in her travel case. Dr. Reeves, what are you doing? Elizabeth turned to see Dr. Vexhai, a tall insect-like being from the Trade Syndicate. His compound eyes reflected the laboratory lights as he stepped closer. I'm going home, Elizabeth said simply. She continued packing her equipment. But your research, Vexhai said, his voice clicking with worry. The Council needs this information. You cannot take it. Elizabeth stopped and looked at him. This research was done by human minds, using human methods. It belongs to humanity. Cries. The Council paid for this laboratory. The equipment belongs to us. Then perhaps the Council should have done the research itself. Elizabeth sealed her case and walked toward the door. Oh, and Dr. Vexhai? The Rigelian plague samples in Freezer 7 will need special care. The temperature must stay exactly at -40 degrees, or the virus will mutate. I hope someone remembers that. Vexhai's antennae twitched with panic. But you studied that virus for 3 years. We do not know how to handle it. No, Elizabeth said as she left. You don't. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were happening. At the Kepler Research Station, human scientists were shutting down experiments that had run for decades. They destroyed their notes on faster-than-light communication theory. They wiped clean the computers that held their work on quantum mechanics. You cannot do this, shouted Professor Grix, a 6-armed creature from the collective. He watched in horror as Dr. James Park deleted years of physics research. This knowledge could change the galaxy. Yes, it could, James agreed. But you called us primitive. You said our emotions made us weak. Why would you want research done by weak, primitive minds? That was political talk. We did not mean. Yes, you did. James finished wiping the last computer. You meant every word. Meanwhile, the galactic communication network was starting to fail. The quantum routers that connected thousands of worlds were built using human-designed protocols. When the human technicians left, no one knew how to maintain them. Commander Zek of the Hegemony Fleet called an emergency meeting. His holographic image flickered as he tried to connect to other fleet commanders across the galaxy. Status report, he demanded. Communications are failing on 17 sectors, reported Captain Rix. Her image was broken and fuzzy. The human-built relay stations are going offline. Get them back online. Sir, we don't understand how they work. The technical manuals are all in human languages, using human mathematics. Our translators cannot make sense of them. Zek slammed his fist on his command table. How did we become dependent on one species? Because they were really good at this stuff, Rick said quietly. At the same time, the galactic economy was beginning to shake. The trade syndicate's computer models, which predicted market trends, had stopped working. Every calculation came back with error messages. Prime Minister Kex Nor of the syndicate stood in his office, staring at screens full of red warning symbols. His assistant, a nervous creature called Flip, brought him another report. Sir, the agricultural markets on 43 worlds have collapsed. No one knows what crops to plant or where to sell them. What about our economic prediction programs? They were designed by humans, sir. The math is too complex for us to understand. Without the humans to run them, we're guessing. Kexnor sat down heavily in his chair. How long before total market collapse? At this rate, maybe 6 weeks. The problems kept growing. On Althari Prime, President Thaxon faced his own crisis. 3 border worlds had stopped sending their taxes. Without the human diplomatic service to negotiate, there was no way to resolve the dispute peacefully. Send the fleet, suggested General QX, to attack our own worlds? Thaxon's voice rose with shock. That will cause revolution. Then what do you suggest? Thaxon stared out his office window at the capital city below. The humans would have found a way to talk to them. They always found a way. Well, the humans are gone. Across space, in the Outer Rim, the Draconis Empire was taking advantage of the chaos. Their war fleets attacked 2 collective mining stations. In the past, human peacekeepers would have stopped the fighting quickly. Now, there were no peacekeepers at all. The collective sent angry messages to the Council, demanding action. But the Council's military forces were in chaos too. 30% of all peacekeeping soldiers had been human. The humans had trained most of the alien officers in space combat tactics. Without human leadership, the remaining forces didn't know how to fight in 3 dimensions. Space battles were different from ground wars, but only humans seemed to understand that. Admiral Grex, of the Collective Fleet, found himself facing Draconis warships, with no idea how to command his forces effectively. All ships, attack formation, he ordered. Sir, which formation? Asked his lieutenant. The humans taught us 6 different attack patterns. Which one should we use? Grex stared at the enemy ships on his screen. He had no idea. Just shoot at them. The battle was a disaster. The collective lost 3 ships and gained nothing. Back on the Council homeworld, emergency sessions ran day and night. President Thaxon tried to assign human responsibilities to other species, but it was like trying to fix a complex machine with the wrong tools. The Zalari will take over disease research, he announced. We do not understand biological systems the way humans do, Krextel admitted. Our science focuses on technology, not life. Then the Meridians will do it. They are healers. We heal through mental energy, said the Meridian representative, a glowing being of pure thought. We know nothing of viruses and medicines. One by one, every solution failed. The galaxy was discovering that humans hadn't just been members of the Council. They had been the glue holding everything together. In his private office, President Thaxon sat alone. His 4 hands held a message he had been trying to write for hours. It was addressed to Earth. To Ambassador Chen, he had started to write, "The Council requests," then erased it. Then, "The Council demands." And erase that too. Finally, he tried. The council humbly asks, but even that felt wrong. The council had shown no humility when the humans were here. Finally, he set the message aside and called his assistant. Send a ship to Earth, he said quietly. Tell them we want to talk. What message should they carry? Thaxon thought for a long moment. Tell them we may have made a mistake. Outside his window, the capital city's lights flickered as the power grid, maintained by human-designed systems, began to fail. In 3 days, the humans had gone from unwanted guests to desperately needed friends, but they were nowhere to be found. 3 weeks after humanity left, the galaxy was burning. Admiral Zorks of the Draconis Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching enemy ships explode in the darkness. His red scales gleamed with satisfaction as another collective transport disappeared in a ball of fire. The 7th sector is ours, reported his second-in-command. Their defense fleet ran away. Excellent, Zorks growled. What news from the council? Still nothing. They sent angry messages, but no warships. Zorks laughed, a sound like thunder. For 300 years, the council's human peacekeepers had kept the Draconis Empire in check. The humans had a strange talent for stopping wars before they started. They would talk and compromise and find solutions that somehow satisfied everyone. But now the humans were gone, and the council had no idea how to stop a real war. The collective worlds were rich in rare metals that the Empire needed. Without the humans to negotiate a trade deal, Zorks had decided to simply take what he wanted. On Collective Prime, Overmind Node 7 connected with emergency frequency signals from across their territory. Draconis fleets have taken the Rigel system, reported Node 23. Antari's mining station is under attack, added Node 41. They destroyed our defense platforms at Vega, came another message. Node 7 processed this information with growing alarm. The collective had always been peaceful traders, not warriors. They had relied on council protection and human negotiation to solve conflicts. What does the council say? Node 7 asked. President Thaxon promises to send help. But their peacekeeping fleet is in chaos. Most of their officers were trained by humans. And the humans? Still silent. Node 7 made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Begin evacuation of outer colonies. If the council cannot protect us, we must protect ourselves. Meanwhile, at council headquarters, President Thaxon faced the worst crisis in galactic history. His emergency cabinet sat around a oval table, all looking lost and frightened. The Draconis have taken 9 systems, reported Defense Minister Kex. Our fleets are afraid to fight them. Why? Thaxon demanded. Because we don't know how. Space combat requires 3-dimensional thinking. The humans understood this naturally. But we learned it from them. Without human tactics, we're helpless. What about ground forces? Worse. 30% of our peacekeepers were human. The rest don't know how to work together anymore. Each species fights differently. Trade Minister Vex High brought more bad news. The economic situation is critical. Without human trade algorithms, we can't predict market changes. Food shipments to 17 worlds have stopped, people are starting to starve, and the communication breakdowns are getting worse, added Technology Minister Grix. 40% of the galactic network is offline. Worlds are becoming isolated. Thaxon felt like he was drowning. Every problem seemed connected to every other problem, and at the center of all of them was the same issue. Humans had been far more important than anyone realized. What about our message to Earth? No response, Keck said quietly. We sent 3 ships. All were turned away at the Sol system border. The humans won't even talk to us. On the planet Zelari Prime, Ambassador Krextal was dealing with his own crisis. The blue-skinned leader who had laughed at human emotions was now facing riots in his cities. The problem was medical supplies. For decades, human doctors had provided medicines and treatments that kept Zelari population healthy. When the humans left, they took their knowledge with them. The fever hospitals are overflowing, reported his aide. Without human antiviral drugs, the sick are dying. Use our own medicines. Sir, We don't make antiviral drugs. We bought them all from human companies. Our own medical science focused on cybernetics and machine repair. Not biology. Krextal stared out his window at smoke rising from the capital city. Sick and desperate people were attacking government buildings, demanding help that he couldn't provide. Contact the humans. We tried. They said to ask the council for help. And when we told them we are the council, they hung up. The same pattern was repeating across the galaxy. The Korthak Empire, built on slave labor, was discovering that human-designed factory systems couldn't run without human oversight. Their mighty war machine was grinding to a halt. The hegemony's massive fleet was stranded because human navigation computers couldn't be repaired or replaced. Ships drifted helplessly through space, unable to plot courses between stars. The Meridian Collective's peaceful worlds were starving because food distribution had always been managed by human logistics experts, who understood how to feed billions of people efficiently. But the worst crisis was happening in the center of the galaxy, where the Council tried desperately to stop the Draconis advance. Admiral Grix commanded what was left of the peacekeeping fleet. His ships surrounded the planet Kepler-7, trying to protect a collective colony from Draconis invasion. Enemy fleet approaching, his tactical officer reported. 60 ships. Battle positions, Grix ordered, trying to remember human combat doctrine. All ships. Attack? The battle lasted 4 hours. Without human coordination, the Council fleet fought like individual ships, instead of a unified force. The Draconis, who had always been natural warriors, destroyed half the Council ships and took the planet. 2 million collective citizens became Draconis prisoners. News of the defeat spread across the galaxy. 3 more species announced they were leaving the Council to make their own deals with local powers. The great alliance that had kept peace for 3 centuries was falling apart. On Earth, Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in her garden, reading reports that came through secret diplomatic channels. She knew about the wars, the economic collapse, the medical crisis. Her heart ached for the suffering beings across the galaxy. Her assistant, David Kim, brought her a cup of tea and a stack of new messages. 47 more species have sent requests for bilateral negotiations, he said. They want separate peace deals with humanity. What kind of deals? They're offering anything. Technology, resources, territory. The Althari are offering 3 entire star systems, just for medical assistance. Sarah sipped her tea and looked up at the stars. What about the Council? Still sending messages every day. President Thaxon's latest offer is pretty desperate. He's promising to give humans veto power over all Council decisions. Too little. Too late. I know. But Sarah, people are dying out there. The collective colonies. The medical crisis on Zilari Prime. The refugee situation in former Korthak space. Maybe we could help without rejoining the Council? Sarah had been thinking the same thing. Humanity had left the Council to avoid being part of an unjust system. But that didn't mean they had to watch innocent people suffer. Draft a message, she said finally. Not to the Council, but to individual worlds. Tell them that while humanity won't rejoin the galactic government, we're willing to discuss direct cooperation with any species that shares our values. What values should we specify? Sarah thought about the slave markets in the Outer Rim, the reason humanity had left in the first place. No slavery. Equal rights for all thinking beings. Peaceful resolution of conflicts. Protection for the weak. That will split the galaxy. Some species will never accept those terms. Then we'll work with those who will. Sarah stood up and looked at the sunset, painting the sky orange and pink. The Council is finished, but maybe we can build something better from the pieces. Above them, the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky. Somewhere among those lights, the galaxy was learning what it meant to lose humanity's guiding hand. And for the first time in galactic history, the civilizations among the stars were discovering that the newest species might also have been the most important. President Thaxon had never visited Earth before. As his shuttle descended through the blue atmosphere, he stared out at the world that had produced the galaxy's most troublesome species. It looked so ordinary. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds. Nothing suggested that this small planet held the key to galactic civilization. Beside him sat Prime Minister Kex Nor of the Trade Syndicate and Overmind Node 7 of the Collective, the three most powerful leaders in the galaxy, reduced to begging for help from a species they had dismissed as primitive. "Remember," Thaxon said as they approached the landing pad, "we must show humility. The humans value that." "Humility," Kexnor repeated the word like it tasted bad. 6 weeks ago, we were their superiors. 6 weeks ago, we had a functioning galaxy. Node 7 pointed out. Now, we have chaos. The shuttle touched down at Geneva Spaceport. Through the windows, they could see human security officers waiting. No honor guard. No ceremony. Just a simple escort. Ambassador Chen met them in a small conference room, not the grand halls they were used to. She wore a plain blue dress and smiled politely as they entered. "Welcome to Earth," she said, gesturing to chairs around a simple wooden table. "Please, sit." The three aliens looked around the room in confusion. Where were the advisors? The protocol officers? The recordings devices? Where was the elaborate ceremony that usually accompanied meetings between galactic leaders? "This is informal," Thaxon said carefully. "That's how we prefer things," Sarah replied. "Would you like some tea? Coffee? Water?" Kexnor's insect features twitched with impatience. "We did not come here for beverages. We came to discuss the crisis, of course. But sometimes important conversations go better when people are comfortable." Sarah poured herself a glass of water and sat down. "What can I do for you?" Thaxon cleared his throat. "Ambassador Chen, the galaxy is in chaos. Wars are spreading. Economic systems are collapsing. People are dying." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "We've been monitoring the situation. Then you know we need help. You need more than help. You need someone to fix the problems you created when you built a civilization on injustice." Node 7 leaned forward, its crystalline form glowing brighter. "We are prepared to offer humanity unprecedented power in the Council. Veto rights over all major decisions, 20% of all Council seats." Sarah sipped her water. "That's very generous. We will also provide technology exchanges," Kexnor added eagerly. "Faster than light engines, matter converters, quantum computers, worth trillions of credits, and territorial concessions," Thaxon said. "The Althari are prepared to grant humanity governance over the entire Sirius sector. 12 inhabited worlds." Sarah listened to each offer calmly. When they finished, she set down her glass and folded her hands on the table. "Those are impressive offers," she said, "but they miss the point entirely." "What point?" Thaxon asked. "You're trying to bribe us to return to a system we consider morally wrong. You're offering us power and wealth to ignore our principles." Kexnor's compound eyes reflected his confusion. "But those are valuable things. Power and wealth are what drive galactic politics. Not for us." The three leaders exchanged glances. Node 7 spoke first. "Then what do you want?" "We want the galaxy to be just. We want slavery to end. We want the strong to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. We want conflicts resolved through talking, not violence." "Those are ideals," Thaxon said. "Practical governance requires compromise. Does it?" Sarah stood and walked to the window. Outside, children were playing in a park, while their parents watched safely. "For 300 years, your council has compromised with evil. Every time someone suggested helping those who suffer, you found excuses not to act. Every time the strong abused the weak, you called it politics." She turned back to face them. "We offered you 15 different proposals to reduce suffering in the galaxy. You rejected all of them. Why should we believe anything would change if we returned? Because we need you," Node 7 said desperately. "Without humanity, the galaxy is falling apart." "Yes, it is, and that's your fault, not ours." Kexnor stood up abruptly, his voice clicking with anger. "You are being unreasonable. We came here in good faith, offering you everything you could want. Everything we could want? Sarah's voice stayed calm, but her eyes grew cold. Did you bring freedom for the slaves in the Outer Rim? Did you bring justice for the planets you've exploited? Did you bring peace for the refugees fleeing your wars? Those are complex issues that require time to resolve. You've had 300 years. How much more time do you need? Thaxon tried a different approach. Ambassador Chen, let us speak practically. Your withdrawal has caused enormous suffering. The Draconis Empire has conquered 17 systems. Medical supplies are failing across the galaxy. Billions of innocent people are paying for this political dispute. For the first time, Sarah's composure cracked slightly. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think it doesn't hurt me to watch people suffer? But staying in your corrupt system would have made us part of that suffering. At least this way, we can help people without supporting the structure that oppresses them. What does that mean? Node 7 asked. Sarah returned to her seat. It means we're not coming back to the Council. But we are willing to work directly with any species or world that shares our values. No slavery, equal rights, peaceful conflict resolution. You want to split the galaxy, Thaxon said, understanding at last. The galaxy is already split. Some species believe in justice. Others believe in power. We'll work with the first group and leave the second alone. Kexnor's voice grew threatening. The Council has significant military resources. We could force compliance. The room grew very quiet. Sarah looked at him steadily for a long moment. Could you? Your fleets can't navigate without human computers. Your officers can't fight without human tactics. Your weapons are breaking down without human maintenance. What exactly would you force compliance with? Kexnor realized his mistake and sat back down. The three leaders were learning what many others across the galaxy had already discovered. Humanity had been far more important than anyone realized. Besides, Sarah continued, force is exactly why we left. You think violence solves problems. We think it creates them. Thaxon made one last attempt. If not the Council, then what? How do you envision galactic governance? Maybe it doesn't need to be galactic. Maybe smaller groups of species with shared values would work better than one giant organization where half the members hate the other half. That would mean the end of the Council as we know it. Yes, it would. Outside, the sun was setting. Golden light filled the conference room as the three alien leaders faced the reality of their situation. They had come expecting to negotiate humanity's return. Instead, they were witnessing the death of their galactic order. Finally, Thaxon spoke. If the Althari were to reconsider our position on certain issues, would you be willing to negotiate separately? What issues? Slavery, for instance. The Althari have never used slave labor, but we have not opposed it strongly enough. Sarah leaned forward with interest. What kind of opposition did you have in mind? Complete prohibition within Althari space. Military action to free slaves when possible. Support for rehabilitation programs. And in return, medical aid for our colonies. Help with our communication systems. Perhaps some trade agreements. Sarah nodded slowly. That sounds like the beginning of a conversation we could have. Kexnor and Node 7 realized what was happening. Thaxon was abandoning the Council strategy and making a separate deal. If the Althari succeeded, other species would follow. You cannot break up the Council, Kexnor protested. 300 years of unity, 300 years of compromise with injustice, Sarah corrected. Maybe it's time to try something different. As the alien leaders prepared to leave Earth, they carried with them the knowledge that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity would not return to the Council, but they might work with individual species who proved they shared human values. The question now was, which civilizations would choose justice over power, and which would cling to the old ways until they collapsed entirely? The answers would determine not just the fate of the galaxy, but the shape of whatever came next. 6 months after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, President Thaxon sat alone in his empty office. Through his window, he could see the great council chamber, where once hundreds of species had gathered. Now it held only 37 delegates. Most of the galaxy had chosen sides. Some species had joined the Draconis Empire's military alliance, believing that strength was the only thing that mattered. Others had formed trade federations or regional coalitions. But the most successful group was something entirely new. They called it the Terran Commonwealth. Thaxon picked up a report from his intelligence service. The Commonwealth now included 43 species, spread across 200 worlds. They all followed the same simple principles: no slavery, equal rights for thinking beings, peaceful resolution of conflicts, and they were thriving. The report detailed how Commonwealth worlds had solved problems that the Council never could. Medical knowledge flowed freely between species, ending plagues that had lasted for centuries. Trade was fair and efficient, managed by systems that put people before profit. Conflicts were resolved through talking and compromise, not threats and violence. "Sir?" His assistant entered the office. "The Meridian delegation is here for the final council session." Thaxon sighed and stood up. Today they would formally dissolve the Galactic Council. After 300 years, the great experiment in galactic unity was ending. In the chamber, the remaining delegates sat in scattered groups. Empty seats stretched in all directions, reminders of how many species had left. "This council session is called to order," Thaxon announced. "We gather today to formally acknowledge what we all know. The Galactic Council, as it has existed for 3 centuries, is finished." No one protested. There wasn't enough support left to continue. Representative Mrix of the Hegemony spoke first. "The Hegemony will focus on our own territorial defense. We thank the Council for its service." One by one, the remaining delegates announced their withdrawal. Some joined regional alliances. Others decided to govern alone. A few announced they were applying to join the Commonwealth. When the last representative spoke, Thaxon looked around the empty chamber. Then, by unanimous consent, the Galactic Council is dissolved. This session is closed. The delegates filed out quietly. No ceremony, no grand speeches. The galaxy's oldest institution ended with a whisper. Thaxon walked slowly back to his office. On his desk waited a personal message from Ambassador Chen. It was addressed not to the council president, but to the leader of the Althari people. He opened it and read, "President Thaxon, the Althari application to join the Commonwealth has been approved. Your species' commitment to ending slavery in your territory and your work to resettle refugees has shown that the Althari understand what it means to build a just society. Welcome to the conversation." Attached was a full membership package. Medical aid for Althari colonies. Help rebuilding their communication systems. Access to Commonwealth trade networks. But most importantly, a voice in decisions that affected their future. Thaxon smiled for the first time in months. Meanwhile, on Earth, Sarah Chen sat in her garden, reading reports from Commonwealth worlds. Each message brought good news. The former collective colonies, now free from Draconis occupation, were rebuilding with Commonwealth help. Human engineers had restored their mining operations, but this time the workers were free citizens, earning fair wages. The medical crisis on Zalari Prime was ending. Once they had banned slave labor and agreed to Commonwealth principles, human doctors had returned to help. The fever hospitals were finally empty. Even more encouraging was news from former Korthak worlds. The warrior species had split into 2 groups. The traditional faction still believed in slavery and conquest, but a growing reform movement, led by young Korthak who had worked with humans, was building something new. The reform faction just liberated 3 slave colonies, David Kim reported as he joined Sarah in the garden. They're requesting Commonwealth membership. All of them? Not just the reformed Korthak. The freed slaves too. Apparently, they want to govern the worlds together. As equal partners, Sarah smiled. 6 months ago, such cooperation would have been unthinkable. The Korthak had been the galaxy's strongest supporters of slavery. Now their own people were leading the fight against it. What about the Draconis Empire? David's expression grew serious. They're in trouble. Turns out that without slave labor and stolen resources, their economy can't support their military. 3 sectors have declared independence. Admiral Zorks is fighting rebellion on 12 worlds. And the Council remnant? 37 species, mostly trying to avoid choosing sides. They're calling themselves the Neutral Alliance, but they're not really allied with anything. Just scared of everyone. Sarah stood and walked to her tomato plants. The garden had grown over the past months, with new vegetables and flowers from across the galaxy. Commonwealth members often sent seeds as gifts, creating a small symbol of the cooperation that was blooming across space. "Ma'am," David hesitated. "There's one more thing. We're getting requests from species that aren't Commonwealth members. They want our help, but they won't accept our conditions." "What kind of help?" "The syndicate worlds are facing economic collapse. They want access to our trade algorithms and financial models, but they refuse to ban slave labor in their territory." Sarah picked a ripe tomato and turned to face David. "What did you tell them?" "The same thing we tell everyone. Commonwealth assistance comes with Commonwealth values. If they want our help building a just society, we're eager to assist. If they want us to help them maintain an unjust one, we're not interested." "Good. What about individual worlds within those species?" "That's different. We've had 17 planets break away from larger governments to join the Commonwealth. When people see what's possible, they want it for themselves." As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's communication device chimed. A priority message from Commonwealth headquarters on Alpha Centauri. She read it quickly, then laughed. "David, you need to see this." The message was from Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, now Director of Commonwealth Medical Services. It read, "Sarah, you'll appreciate this irony. The Zilari government has just passed the galaxy's strongest anti-slavery laws. Ambassador Krextal, the same one who called us primitive and emotional, personally sponsored the legislation. He says he learned that emotions like compassion are actually signs of advanced civilization, not weakness. He's also asking if we need help with any other medical emergencies in Commonwealth space. Apparently, he wants to pay forward the kindness humans showed his people." "Things change." Sarah laughed again. 6 months ago, Krextal had been humanity's strongest critic on the council. Now he was asking how he could help spread human values. "The galaxy is learning," David observed. "Some of it. The parts that want to learn," as the sun set over Earth, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sarah reflected on how much had changed. Humanity's departure from the council had seemed like a disaster at the time. Now it was beginning to look like the galaxy's salvation. The old system had been built on compromise with injustice. Every attempt at reform had been voted down by those who benefited from suffering. The new system was different. Species that shared basic values could work together effectively, while those that didn't went their separate ways. It wasn't perfect. There were still wars, still poverty, still injustice in many parts of the galaxy. But for the first time in centuries, there was also hope. People could see that different choices were possible. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by another message, this one marked urgent. She opened it and read, "Ambassador Chen, this is Thaxon of the Althari. I write not as a former council president, but as someone who has learned from his mistakes. The Commonwealth has shown us what it truly means to be civilized. The Althari formally request membership in your alliance. We pledge to uphold your values and contribute our knowledge to the common good. We are ready to join the conversation about building a galaxy based on justice, not power. Please consider our application." Sarah smiled and reached for her communication device to draft a response. The galaxy was indeed learning. One species at a time, one world at a time, one person at a time. The Galactic Council was gone. In its place, something better was growing. Not a single vast government trying to control everything, but a network of civilizations that chose to work together because they shared the same dreams. As she began typing her response to Thaxon, Sarah looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere among those lights, former enemies were becoming friends, former oppressors were learning to serve justice. Former slaves were becoming free citizens. It had taken walking away from the old galaxy to build a new one. But sometimes, Sarah realized, you had to be willing to lose everything to discover what was truly possible. The conversation about what it meant to be civilized was just beginning.